super lovely to be with you all tonight on this evening. My name is Matthias, and my biggest passion in life is to be with and surround myself with people who have realized that they can influence the world around them. And I don't know if you've experienced this, but there's really sort of two categories almost emerging of some people who seem to understand that everything around us is constructed in some way, and we can deconstruct it and shape it in the ways that we want to, and some others who haven't quite yet be empowered to that level where they understand that they indeed can change the world as well. And it is, I think, this ability to what I would like to refer to as change making that I think is becoming almost like the new literacy required to be successful as an individual, as society, or the global community overall in a world defined by change and in the 21st century. So tonight in this talk, followed by a Q&A and hopefully a fruitful discussion with you all, I want to make that argument that change making is becoming the new literacy and is becoming a critical competence and skill to succeed as the global community. Before I make a bit of a theoretical argument, I just want to start the evening with a couple of stories that at least provide me with a high doses of daily inspiration. This young man here is Josh, and he's originally from the UK, lives in London, and about the age of 22, he got so tired of gun and gang violence in his home city that he decided to do something about it. And he started an initiative that helps gang members in London to leave that rotten path and create their own little social enterprises, mostly focused on repairing cell phones and the cracked iPhone screens, called Cracked It. Super successful with this, massive success in the city of London and now spreading to the UK, started it at 22 and dedicates his life to change making. This is Ruth from Uganda, who unfortunately was orphaned at a very young age due to AIDS. Members of her family died due to AIDS. And again, she didn't become idle and sort of desperate, but said, I have to do something about this. And she empowered herself and created Ask Without Shame, which is a cost-free service for young people all across the country and now spreading in East Africa that provides cost-free advice around sexual education, menstrual health, and such topics. This is Lefteris Arapakis from Greece, another what I consider just an amazing, beautiful change maker out there who, just like many of us, is super anxious about this issue of plastic being in the sea. You've probably all heard of this issue. And what he decided to do, I find quite genius. He said, look, there's so many fishermen in Greece and along the coastline of the country, why don't we empower them to not only go out there and fish, but sort of become ocean cleaners? And he's training them to go to the sea and still mind their business, but at the same time collect plastic waste. And it's been already a couple of tons of plastic waste that he took out of the ocean, and it's now spreading and growing. This is Jijen Wu from Singapore in Asia. She created The Hidden Good. It's an initiative that tries to create viral activities involving young people in positive activities and kind of inspiring them to do a daily activity of well-doing and well-meaning and sort of good activities. And in 2012, we've realized something, which is that especially young change makers tend to be extremely lonely. They're sort of the crazy person in the family. Nobody really understands why they dedicate their life to making the world a better place. Why don't they mind about their own business and take up a job? They're usually at a high risk of burnout because they're really consumed of their mission and their vision, and they don't stop working on it, so they don't really take good care of themselves while caring so much for others. And they also don't really have the opportunity to collaborate, which is really important and critical if you want to create systemic change in complex issues. So what we did is to create a global community of young changemakers called the ChangemakerXchange, which is now 800 members in 70 countries around the world, sharing experiences, good and bad, collaborating, thinking about ways how to become more systemic. And I guarantee you, I could probably continue for 5 hours just mentioning every single example of what these people do, because it's just incredible. And I think there is a bigger story here, and that is actually the issue I'd like to share with you tonight. I believe, this is the way I look at this issue, and there might be other explanations, and people might call me up and say, well, that you don't have your theory right and all, but I'll go at it, and you be the judge later in the discussion. I think we live in a world that is very much defined by a binary mindset. We have black and white, we define women and man, we either remain or we leave, we're in or we're out, we're on this side or the other, we're against or for something. We either consider people to be abled and strong, or we look at them as disabled and weak. It is about my God and your God. It's about either the economy or the environment. It's about poor and rich. It's about left and right. What if I'm in the middle? What if I think of the world as being a lot more complex than being leftist or rightist? And so the world we live in, I think, is too complex for this binary mindset. And you might remember this book from many years ago by Friedman, who wrote that the world is becoming flat. I think that's true. It's sort of becoming very connected, very globalized, but at the same time, it's also becoming crazy complex. Everything is connected. And not only is it becoming complex in terms of the economy or civil society or any other field of society, but we also have very complex shared challenges as humanity. And again, I probably don't tell you anything new, but there is now issues that are so complex and so connected and sort of touching everyone's life on this planet that I think we have to get to a new consciousness of everything is connected and we can only solve it together. The migration issue, terrorism, and the #1 most critical issue of all, climate change. And I find this quote to be so beautiful and fitting that I make an exception and actually read a slide, which I hope I usually don't, but I'd love to just read this to you. No part of the human race is separate, either from other human beings or from the global ecosystem. It will not be possible in this integrated world for your heart to succeed if your lungs fail, or for your company to succeed if your workers fail, or for the rich in Los Angeles to succeed if the poor in Los Angeles fail, or for Europe to succeed if Africa fails, or the other way around, or for the global economy to succeed if the global environment fails. So, #1 argument that I'd like to make tonight: there is complexity in an ever-changing world and shared common challenges that require us to think differently of the problems that we face as society. But there's also another mega trend that I see, which is that our approach to life, of how we organize, how we work, how we live, how we perceive the world, is also rapidly changing. I mean, for thousands of years, it was pretty certain what you're going to do in your life. It was pretty easy because you had no choice. You were a farmer in 99.9% of the cases, growing your own food. That was your work, that was your life, surviving. And so the agricultural age kind of got us into this mode of, you know what you're going to do step by step. It was about survival and all of that. And all of that changed in the industrial age, where it was still kind of fairly certain what you're going to do, but it already was a lot more complex. But it was an age that was defined by repetition. You took little steps and the assembly line was invented, and humanity and human work and our approach to life and work was very much defined by a step-by-step repetitive task. And I think there is a bit of that still in our lives today. If you look at the school system, you know, it prepares you for a world that is defined by repetition. You kind of learn things by heart. Teachers teach you sort of standard knowledge that you then ideally want to apply. But all of that is going away with technology, obviously. And again, this is nothing new, but to put it into context, we now are in a world that is constantly changing, and you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, what the innovation is that's coming at us. And at the same time, it is exponential. It's changing faster and faster and faster. So the rate of change is accelerating as well. So the argument I'd like to make is that we're in the midst of both a social revolution in terms of us kind of taking on a global mindset of we're all connected and we live in a complex world, and a technological revolution. And what I want to share with you now is how the organization that I work with, Ashoka, is thinking about this and kind of has to question everything that we do. Before I do that, because I think it's important to then make the argument of what we're trying to change, I'd like to just very quickly tell you what we've been doing for the last 35 or 40 years. We're a global network of social entrepreneurs. Our mission is very much that of identifying, supporting, and connecting what we think are system-changing social entrepreneurs with amazing concepts to make wide-scale change. And good examples of that is, for example, Ashoka fellow Jimmy Wales, the founder of Wikipedia, who has, as we all know, fundamentally changed the way we consume and share knowledge. Another example from an Ashoka fellow in the US is Truckers Against Trafficking. Kenneth Paris founded that, who wants to fight human trafficking, and thought of a genius way of empowering truckers that kind of are everywhere in the US and are on the highways where this human trafficking actually takes place, and allows them to very quickly share when they see an issue and report that, and there's a lot quicker reaction to potential causes of human trafficking. Or here from Germany, Frank Hoffmann, who discovered that blind women, because of their special senses, can detect anomalies in the women's chest and therefore discover breast cancer at a stage where the chances for treatment and for healing are a lot higher than if a regular doctor would do the breast examination. However, and this is, I believe, where it gets interesting. A couple of years ago, Bill Drayton, the founder of Ashoka, and a lot of colleagues around the world in our organization, they realized that there is a common thread in what social entrepreneurs do. And that common thread is that their ultimate goal seems to be to empower people to become the engines of their own change. It's all about, no matter what subject you look at, no matter what social entrepreneur you look at, those that are really serious, it's all the time about empowering people to be change makers. And based on that realization, we started to dig a little deeper. And we did something that we call collaborative entrepreneurship. We looked at, for example, the 500 social entrepreneurs that work with young people, or the 300 that work in the environment, or the 700 that work in some way in defining new types of economic models. And we discovered a couple of things. And again, please challenge this. We're not professors. We're happy to self-criticize and to discuss this, but there is sort of 5 things that we believe social entrepreneurs do to empower people to be change makers, and they do that because if they would all be empowered to be change makers, the world would look very different. So independent from the issue you work on, if you achieve the mission and the vision of empowering people to be change makers, that, at least in our understanding, is sort of the highest impact that you can have. And we believe it's these 5, it could be 4, it could be 7, let's not get hung up on this, but these are the things that we distilled as learnings from looking at the social entrepreneurs that we work with. I think the fundamental skill is empathy. the ability to relate to others and the environment around you, but a special kind of empathy, cognitive empathy, some might call it, which is the type of empathy that leads you to action. You don't only feel sorry for someone, you somehow have an impulse to act. So that type of empathy, I think, is fundamental for the complex world of change that we live in if we want to solve our collective challenges. Ideally, I don't want to make too bold statements, but ideally every one of us has it and develops it from a very young age on. We also think that co-creative teamwork is really important, where everyone starts to be an initiator and has agency. So we're kind of leaving that age of that style of leadership where you tell others what to do. Everyone has to be empowered and co-create. We think there's a new leadership emerging where you're driven by purpose and you see the bigger picture. We're leaving the assembly line and we're entering this complex world of change where you have to have that skill and that competence to look at everything around you that's happening in order to be able to navigate it and make real change. We also think that change making as a skill or competence, which means applying all of this to actually doing good, is really important, because obviously we get the question a lot of, yeah, you can have all these skills but still be the bad guy. True, but I mean, obviously we're talking about this in the context of wanting to improve the world and organizing in open, fluid teams of teams. What that means is that sort of the silos, the borders, the boundaries of our institutions and organizations have to kind of dissolve. We have to work together a lot more across sectors, across industries, across organizations. It shouldn't make that much of a difference anymore in the future, whether you work in politics or civil society, in a foundation or a company, because there's common challenges that we have to address. And if you think of it, and I want to give a few examples, I think that's pretty much what social entrepreneurship is actually fundamentally about. And there's examples in history. This is Raiffeisen, here from Germany, who invented the idea of cooperatives and collaborative banking, empowering at that age farmers to be, more self-driven and to have the power in their hands instead of the hands of the resellers or the bigger companies. If you think of Maria Montessori, who in 1906 opened the Casa dei Bambini in Rome, which nowadays is called the first kindergarten of the world, she realized that we have to educate the youngest in society for them to be empowered and lead a self-fulfilled and a fulfilled life. There's also recent examples of where social entrepreneurs add to this everyone a changemaker vision. One of them is from Canada. This was founded by Mary Gordon. It's called Roots of Empathy. And believe it or not, what she does is to take babies from the neighborhood of where there's a school, and she puts them into the classroom. You might even see that it says teacher on the little t-shirt. And she allows the young students in the classroom to develop scientifically proven high levels of empathy, well, because babies can't talk. They can't tell you what they feel. You have to observe, you have to feel, you have to train that skill. So once a week, the baby teacher comes, levels of bullying go down, the schools get higher levels of well-being, everybody's more at peace, there's less fights. People learn empathy through the interaction with the babies. This is an example from Berlin. Margaret Rusfeld, another great social entrepreneur who has created the Evangelische Schule Berlin Zentrum, ESBZ, which completely got rid of grades, timetables, subjects, and people in the school learn in terms of challenges. So they would say, what can we do about the waste in our neighborhood? And then the teachers kind of dock on to that question and talk about biology and CO2 emissions and the economy. And it's just an amazing place that will really open your eyes for the future of education that we indeed need for a world that is defined by rapid and accelerating change. And another example here from Belgium called Bootsorg. Joost de Blok is his name. He created a system where at the moment I think about 6,000, what's the right name? Patient treaters, nurses and home nurses, completely self-organize. You know what the #1 most hated job in Germany is? The one of taking care of the elders. It's, you know, people earn bad wages, they're super stressed, they have to go into a home and finish everything in 15 minutes. It's hardcore. He's completely changed that and is now the favorite employer in the entire country in an area that just across the border is perceived as something that nobody wants to do. Why? Because he lets people self-organize. Remember the examples of the skills that I referred to earlier? He is living that new type of leadership where he says, it's your decision. If you want to spend an hour with this patient and 5 minutes with the other, I trust you. And there's now thousands and thousands of people who work under the umbrella of Bootsorg, completely self-organized. Call it holacracy, new leadership, whatever have you, but it's beautiful. And so what we as an organization, and you know, myself personally being very excited about this, what we think should be something that we bring to the world, not just as Ashoka, but something that hopefully many people kind of take upon themselves as their mission, is that I think we have to create what we call, some others might call it a paradigm change, we like to call it a frame change. We need to change the way people in this world look at life and society and understand that they need certain competencies that they haven't had before in order to successfully navigate life and solve challenges together. So instead of working on specific singular issues, what we're trying to do as an organization is to move to this level where we try and trigger a movement of a frame change towards a world in which everyone is a change maker. And there's 3 areas that we focus on right now, and there might be more coming as we speak, but the 3 that we start with, because we have a massive number of social entrepreneurs working on these, and we co-create this with the fellowship and our partners in our network, are those 3. Every child masters empathy. That's the new vision that we have under this umbrella. And how can we make sure of that? Well, working with the people who do this and amplify it. The second one is we want to make sure that every young person has the ability, the right, the motivation, the empowerment to practice change making. Because if you, as a say 12 or 13-year-old, realize that you have the power to shape the world around you, that's something that doesn't leave you. You won't forget. It gets into your DNA and your bones, and it doesn't leave you for the rest of your life. The realization that what I see here and what I perceive to be a problem around me, I can change that. So we want to spread that paradigm. And the third one for the moment is purpose-driven co-creation, and what we in the German context and some others would refer to as new work. A new type of leadership and a new type of organizing where we don't do the repetitive being told what to do, but we rather empower people to see the bigger picture, be driven by a purpose, co-create, collaborate, and work together. And so that is what I'm excited about and what I spent most of my days doing, which is to dream up ideas and activities and strategies of how we can get to a world in which everyone has the ability to be a change maker. That's it for the talking part of this little input. Thank you very much for listening. I want to throw in a question to maybe kick off the Q&A, but then obviously come up with your own ones, and maybe the hosts have a couple more. But you know, there is obviously this notion of, does it really have to be everyone? Isn't it still institutions that solve our problems? What would the world look like in which everyone is a change maker? So the everyone bit of the everyone a change maker gives me good food for thought, and I'd just like to throw that question in. But for the moment, thank you for listening, and let's start a little discussion, hopefully.